Yeah, okay, and the audience, welcome very, very much to Conversations. It's a great pleasure to welcome to Conversations a dear friend of mine, and I would add most decidedly of the broader world, that being Colia Clark. And she's here. She's got a lot to report. We've been talking about things in a very comprehensive kind of way. We both have had a great deal of focus upon events in North Africa, in Libya, and so forth, and other matters too. We're going to talk about Haiti. And Colia, welcome so much. It's so good to see you again, my dear.
It's always my pleasure, Harold, to come and sit down and chit-chat with one of the finest minds on planet Earth.
Oh, well,
me? You're my classroom.
Who are you talking to? No,
I come to the classroom, the Al China classroom.
Well, I don't know.
And because you're so forward-thinking, I mean, you know, you are what we need as we head into the 21st century.
Well, I guess so. I think we need something. I certainly do. I must say I'm a little bit filled with a lot of negative, depressive kind of angst a little bit about the state of the world in lots of ways. But I don't want to go into all that. You have been, I'm going to go quick with you because you're an absolute pioneer, civil rights person back in the early 60s and all that, Stokely, all of that. Maybe that's something that you would want to just go over real quickly because you've been there with Martin King and other people.
Well, I started out with Medgar W.
You were in the civil rights movement before civil rights was really becoming cool, as they say.
Yeah. Well, I started out with Medgar W. in Mississippi as his special assistant. The founder of the North Jackson NAACP Youth Council, one of the founders of the Tougaloo College, which was the first NAACP college chapter in the state of Mississippi. And so I started with Medgar, but quickly things moved in the early 60s very fast. You know, the 60s was a great sit-in movement. Mississippi didn't enter the sit-in movement until 61.
Well, 60, 61 seemed early in terms of what was coming, because there was the whole Voting Rights Act, and all that was still years ahead.
And a few years ahead. Everything was so fast.
A lot of dogs with Bull Connor and all kinds of stuff with freedom riders and all that.
Well, I went through that, but not the freedom rights. My first husband was on the freedom rights, but not I. I certainly supported it, but NAACP did not. Mississippi NAACP and the national NAACP did not support the freedom rights.
Okay.
Especially after Robert Kennedy called off the freedom rights after the incident at Birmingham.
It was so, Birmingham. It was
Alabama.
So ugly, It
was very ugly, and so they called it off, but the voice of youth, in this case, Diane Nash, who would become Diane Nash Bevel, came out from the SNCC chapter in Nashville, Tennessee. Now, SNCC was a student nonviolent coordinating committee.
I associate that with Stokely.
Yes, that's Stokely.
Yeah, I love Stokely.
Who didn't love Stokely? Kwame Ture, for those
Kwame Ture took the name of Kwame and Nkrumah,
so what happens is that she calls it back on and say, look, Robert Kennedy has no right to dictate policy for black folk. And this is essentially what she said.
He was worried about it was too hot, it was too fast, it was too
Robert Kennedy was worried about the bombings of the buses and the burning of the bus in Anniston, Alabama on Mother's Day, 1961. So they're called back on by youth. And when the student movement calls it back on and they move into first New Orleans and from New Orleans into Birmingham and from Birmingham cross Selma into Montgomery where there are 5,000 member mob assaults them at the Montgomery bus station, and then it's on because it forces John Fitzgerald Kennedy, well, it forces Dr. King, one, to get up out of his leisure seat in Atlanta and take a fast car ride. He comes fast as lightning across from Atlanta into Montgomery, Alabama, to enter the church there, Fred Shuttlesworth's First Baptist Church. Dr. Rapp Abernathy's First Baptist Church at Montgomery. And there he will let the world know and make a call to John Kennedy to say, look, we got a crisis here, of mammoth proportions. We have the Klan moving in. They're beating and striking. They beat the Freedom Riders as they got off the bus.
Strange fruit hanging on every tree.
That's right. Sinstack, who had been John Fitzgerald Kennedy's representative on that bus that came into Montgomery, was assaulted when he tried to stop the beating of the white girls who were the white female freedom riders. So we had people with pipes being pushed through their ears. The brother out of Michigan who will die 2 weeks later, who was beaten here so severely. It is this period of history that I'm a part of, but not a part of the historic rides. We will be in Mississippi saying that we will take our time, and we did. Our first demonstration, Tougaloo College, where I was a student, was nine students demonstrated at the local library, which was, of course, segregated like everything else in Mississippi. So it's out of that. I don't want to stay here in this milieu. It's out of this milieu that I come. I come out of
How
this.
do we account for history and its unfolding and so forth? There have been strange fruit hanging on the trees down there. You had Jim Crow, you had all that stuff. What is it that where something happens existentially in the society, where something big is going to be happening in terms of progressive change? How do we account for that? Why then? What was the context? What was there going on? How come we were able to finally get around to that issue that after living 250 years with slavery and all the rest of it?
But it's a lot of things that happen.
Or can we understand?
It starts after slavery. We spent a whole program talking about it. But let us go to the essentials. The essentials is in 41, Roosevelt comes into power, and we get a call for a mass march on Washington, coming from the head of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters. Of course, he was representing the black nationalist movement at that time, A. Philip Randolph.
Right.
And Roosevelt yielding and setting up the Fair Employment Practice Bureau, offering 2% of the federal jobs for the war to blacks. Of course, blacks did not get 2% of those contracts, but they got some of those contracts.
It was segregated. The military was segregated.
It was totally segregated.
It's apartheid.
Hey, Richard Wright says American Jim Crow, South Africa Jim Fish. It's the same story.
It wasn't so bad in Europe, I don't think, was it?
Well, it depends on whose eyes you're looking through in Europe. If you're looking through American expatriates who go there like Baldwin and others, it's not such a bad place. But if you're looking through the eyes of many European blacks, it's another story. But what we see though is this big picture. We got the March on Washington call. We got the end of the all-white primary in court legislation. Of course, at the same time, we're getting the end to law schools being segregated, the end of segregation in higher education in many of the southern institutions. We see this all unfolding. At the same time, there's massive lawsuits engineering segregation off the stage with the NAACP leading that battle through the man called Mr. Civil Rights. And then, of course, at the same time, you got the end of the poll tax, the end of the war, and Bilbo, Senator Bilbo of Mississippi, being pushed out of the Senate, with blacks coming in from Mississippi to testify in the congressional hearings in 45 about not only his madness, and he was a madman. I mean, a true madman. But also about the serious violations of black folks' right to vote in the state of Mississippi. I mean, it was just unheard of. And then you get the open housing legislation in 48, some from the federal government for federal housing.
Desegregated the military, Truman.
And then the Truman in 48 will desegregate the military. Just look at this battery of things. At the same time, you get some other things happening. You get the Congress of Racial Equality in Chicago in 42, the first sit-in movement. And this was when Fellowship, Reconciliation, and these groups were pretty much had a few blacks. It wasn't a big black population here. James Farmer will emerge as a leader of the Congress of Racial Equality later.
Gunnar Myrdal said that was America's dilemma, was racism.
I
think it was worse in North America than most anywhere else in the world in terms of violating all means of identity and the treatment that was delivered down. Worse than in the Caribbean, I think. Worse than in Brazil.
I don't know that America is worse, because I think there's a psychological impact that we don't talk about. That the African in the United States was very clear about the fact that they were Africans, even though we did not want to accept that identity, because that identity of an African meant that you were nothing. To be black meant you were nothing. The meaning of black. But if you look at what's happening in other parts of the Caribbean, if you look at South and Central America, where people to this hour, many of them don't want to even be classified as black. And you look at us, we didn't want to be classified as black, but when 60s came, we were happy when Kwame said black power. Whoa, goodbye. We are black. Overnight.
And beautiful.
Oh, and Dr. King saying it is beautiful to be black.
Right.
So these are overnight things, but the progression toward this point Well, a number of factors. It's 54 Supreme Court decision.
Yeah.
Even though it said about all deliberate speed, you know.
Molasses in January.
The busing decisions, the killing of Emmett Till for the first time. The lynchings were always. Yeah. But this child's mother did something that other mothers had not done. She said, no, open that coffin.
Yeah.
I want the world to see what they have done to my son.
He was down from Chicago, wasn't he?
Yes. I visited down in Money, Mississippi. And then not only the lynching of Emmett Till, but the first time that same age group, a 15-year-old girl at Montgomery, Alabama, on March the 2nd, 1955, took a seat on a bus and refused to get up.
Before what's her name?
For 9 months to have a baby. Rosa Parks going to be 9 months later in December.
Really? With 9 months?
It's very interesting. I always say, you know, history is such an irony.
Isn't it?
Because in this is the first month, but in the 7th month you get another girl, Mary Louise Smith, who takes a seat and refuses to get up.
All right, good.
So you get, she's 17. So you get a 15-year-old, a 17-year-old, and you get the birth of the civil rights movement.
So there's stirrings in the universe. There's stirrings in the air. Something's in the air that something can happen that couldn't have happened 50 years before.
Could not happen before,
so
because
that's what I'm trying
you needed all these things, and you needed Africa to be pushing toward the independence movement.
That's true enough,
So Africa's pushing, it's after the war. Africa's pushing toward the independence movement, throwing the West out.
Yeah, the Eurocentric colonization of the world that we're backing up from, that's why you needed a UN.
That's correct.
In large
that's
measure.
Correct. So the UN becomes the group that we're going to be talking about partially today.
I hope so,
That will take forward the Western police force. It's a Western police force. I mean, it's a very embarrassing situation.
Well, I guess the thing
because we need a UN. We need a body that can talk about governance for the world for international laws.
We need something that is going to stand up for those who are what they saw in all the wisdom schools and so forth, for the least among us.
That's correct.
Because the evolution of politics is always concerned with those who are in the seats of power, to feather their nest even further. They help each other, and they get more and more concentrated power. And there's no system that takes into account the whole of the human society, including the least among us, the least advantaged in terms of the way it's all set up to benefit those who are already rich and powerful.
Yeah, and it's all about policing the world, setting up police forces, military operations that can protect capitalist interests abroad.
Capitalist and interests of the favored.
That's right.
Yeah.
So if you want to set up a company in Kenya, you need a police force there, because otherwise the people in Kenya will say, oh, we want our share of that company. These are our natural resources.
The people of the world are going to be saying, or they have been saying, they're saying it, and then there are retrograde forces that go against that, protecting the interests of those who always have been and remain rich and powerful in a position of lordship over the others. And that's the way the world is largely constructed now in every political entity in the world, including the United States of America.
Oh, America is
Do you understand what I'm saying?
It's lead here. Look, I was going to tell you about this.
Go ahead, talk.
I was online this morning, and I saw this piece from Alternet, and it talks about the Pentagon elite waging a global war whose size and scope has not been revealed until now. The U.S. Special Operations Commander, Colonel Tim Nye, spoke to Nick Turser, an investigative reporter on military power and national security. He went on to tell this reporter that American commandos are carrying out secret missions in 70 countries as we speak.
Okay, do you lay it out, your chapter and verse? Is there a link to it or something?
You can go to Alternet and get it.
Alternet's good. Yeah, Alternet's
right?
there. Yeah, okay.
So by the end of 2011, Obama has increased this. So that by the end of this year, there will be 120 countries in which we have these clandestine Pentagon elite secret wars. 60% of the world's nations will be invaded by us in one way or the other.
Well, we've done a pretty good job. We got military bases in all of the stands now.
That's correct.
We're surrounding China. We're surrounding Iran. We've got bases everywhere. We've invaded Iraq. We've done that. We've done that in there. We've done this thing in Libya. We've engineered that overthrow and so forth like that.
That's correct. And what are we doing?
We've got these weapons systems. They're like something out of a science fiction movie, these predators that have no pilots. It's like something out of a science fiction movie
Well,
where
is.
you don't have to lose anybody because it can all be delivered from a base in Nevada down upon people.
Right.
And it's very dangerous when you have an arrogance of thinking the system that you're trying to impose is one that has historical legitimacy, like Bull Connor thought his bulldog gave him legitimacy.
That's correct.
And that's more or less the metaphor that holds for the United States of America and their NATO allies. They don't have a system that's able to serve the interests of the whole bulk of the people of the world, nor do the other political leaderships of the
But
system.
to demean the UN and make it the bulldog.
Well, okay, use it. They would
Use it.
Well, the Security
This is
Council
it.
has a veto, don't they? They have a
They have a
it's all
veto
set
power.
up.
Any
Yeah.
one member can veto the whole thing.
So it's still the elite trying to
It is
rule.
still
as
the
much as
European
Rome.
powers. European powers, and I'm going to come to that when we talk about the UN in Haiti.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Making decisions
Yes,
for the
ma'am.
rest of the
Aristide,
world.
Yeah.
And not all the European powers.
Yeah.
The elite of the European powers.
Well,
France.
Sarkozy.
And Great Britain.
Yeah,
France.
Yeah, right. Sarkozy ought to be.
That's correct.
They
That's
ought to
right.
have a tumbril to put
Germany.
in.
I mean, we look at who's making the decisions.
Right. NATO, it's European colonialism all over
All
again,
over
isn't it?
again. It's
just
trying to reestablish it too, as
Yeah.
fast as it can.
Looks like it's
Libya,
doing it.
Haiti, Ivory Coast, Congo. We could just go Sudan. All become the prime examples.
Would it
of
be
this.
worthwhile if what was being advanced? I saw. Let's just take a little sidebar. We're trying to look at the big
I'm
picture.
looking at the big picture. Yeah.
And thank God for humor. If I didn't have humor and be able to get a little laugh on things every once in a while, I think I would curl up and die because there's so much injustice in the world. And so the Monty Python crew was doing a thing one time about Rome, and the one was Brian, the life of Brian, and he said. And they had these people. They were kind of ignorant people and everything. They're talking. They say, "Down with the Romans! They're terrible. They're persecuted." And then one guy said, "Well, they did bring the aqueducts." And he said, "Well, okay, except for the aqueducts and the fresh water." And they did build these pretty good roads. Like that. See, because sometimes the people are coming, and the advancement of civilization brings some progress with it and so forth.
But they built them with
overall,
slaves.
Yeah.
They were built with Yugoslav slaves, and that's how we got the word slaves, and other slaves.
Slaves
built those roads and built those aqueducts at Rome.
Yeah, that's right.
Who built them? And we might even ask who designed them.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, because oftentimes it's the slave population that's doing the designing as well. The South is a great example of that.
We did a program with Nat Wood that aired a couple days ago. We taped it this very day. And the thing is, we're coming out of history. We were coming out of history in the '60s when you were doing your thing as a young lady, and there was something blowing in the wind. Bobby Dylan sang a song.
I loved it.
It came to be, there was something existential that was going on that caused things to move. We're going through another one of those phases now on this planet.
We are, and it's going in the same way. We see demonstrations worldwide.
Yeah.
We see mass protests worldwide. These are the things that we saw in the 50s that were leading into the 60s. We saw demonstrations in Germany. Korea had its movement going. The war was ending, but Korean students were not satisfied. We began to look around the world. If we look back at the 50s, we could get a fairly good picture of where we are now, coming into the 60s. The 50s are places, mass demonstration in Philadelphia, youth marching. So we talk about a time period in which
was there a lot going on?
We don't want to see it as a lot, but when we look at it, when we look at the things that were going on, though they seem few, they were
small,
really
maybe.
Very huge. They might seem small, but they were huge. Whether it's the young people going into schools in '57 in Arkansas, it was shaking up the world. It was shaking up the southern, the very southern paradigm was being shaken by its neck.
Do you know that they had a southern Cornwallis when they made the revolution? He was the forces. That they had a southern strategy in the Revolutionary War when we were fighting the Royalists, the King George and everything. And that, 70% of the people from the South, the men, white men, were on the side against the Patriots, George Washington, Jefferson, and so forth, Franklin. They were against them, sided with the... Sided with the old order.
Whoever's in charge, and that is the struggle we're having in America
today. And that's always the case. There's a lot of people who want to suck up. That's the problem.
That's right. That's right.
To the power that be with the power. Maybe you can make some money or whatever. But and so you have a thing where you're fighting against the tide of people. And I said with Nat, we said we do have to anchor ourselves in terms of history.
That's correct.
But we
That's
don't
correct.
have to anchor ourselves with the injustices inherent in the anchoring to history. We have to see some reason for there to be something new. Something new is going on. You have to anchor yourself with it, and you have to be sort of able to include that. You have to do it. But then the transformative quality is the thing that ought to be front and center, really. That
yes, it really should be.
The future influences the present as much as the past. That's Friedrich Nietzsche said.
Yes.
The future, we should be future-oriented, and the capabilities that are evolving for us to have a more just order, other than that which we came out of. Maybe we should be a little easy on the people coming out of history, because it was a very much more restricted capability than is obviously the case collectively, both in terms of our ability to destroy each other in weapons and also to liberate each other. We may be at a point where we're either going to eliminate or liberate the human society.
Nobody wants pain. We don't want pain.
No, that's
People
true.
are fear of pain, the pain of losing jobs, the pain of going to jail, the pain of losing some perceived prestige.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so there was no sin in the South, and people used to sing it every Sunday morning in hymn.
What's that?
Must I be carried to the skies on flower beds of ease? No, was the refrain. There's a cross we all must bear, a cross for you, for me. It was difficult for people to imagine that they had to pick up that cross, even though they were wearing the cross. I already had black folk were in the dirt with that cross.
What about the people who were fashioning that cross and nailing people to that cross, and the people that were in positions of power? How do you get to the people who are going to use the instruments of historical reification of outdated institutions and ideas?
The way in the 60s...
How do you get to the people who are embedded in the old, rather than looking to the future?
To the new. One of the things nonviolence did,
yeah,
it was shook the Southern mentality at its core.
Good.
Because black folk were supposed to be scared of jails. Black folk were supposed to be scared of being beaten.
Well, who isn't scared of being jailed or being beaten or being tortured or being burned?
No. Yeah. There was a core group of people out of the nonviolent movement who said, I ain't afraid of your jails.
Okay.
Not afraid of your billy club. I'm not even afraid of death. So you're beating a man down and he's abnormal, you know? Because you're right, the normal person says, oh, I don't want to be hit.
Yeah, right.
And you're beating somebody who was not going there.
Yeah.
It operates in your head.
Yeah.
It throws you off because you don't know what to do. I saw a white man beating somebody. He looked at the person and he put his club down because it's like, I done beat you, I've kicked you.
Yeah.
And you still are not budging from your position. I put you in jail and you say, well, can I get a broom, please? This place is nasty.
Yeah.
Let's sweep it out.
Yeah, right.
No, you're not supposed to sweep out jail.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be scared of jail.
It's hard to run against the curve of that prejudice.
But it was that psychological development
status, or
out of a nonviolent struggle that forced the Southern mind to back out because it didn't know what to do.
Now, do we need that in the modern world now, as you and I talk in the year 2011?
Well, it was modern is always a term, Harold, that comes up whenever you use it. I mean, every hour is a modern hour. Egypt was modern when it was Egypt. The 60s was modern when they were modern.
What?
Modern is always the time in which you find yourself, the moment in the hour in which you find yourself.
Yeah.
That's a modern moment. So right now,
morning.
Yeah, right now, a modern moment. Right now, we can use the same old strategies that humans have used throughout history. Throughout history, they have been what appears to be nonviolent strategies.
Yeah.
Whether they were sit-ins, or refusals to work, or strikeouts, or whatever. Those strategies are still good. Empire only moves forward when we begin to believe that we don't have the vehicles to stop it. And we have the vehicles to stop it.
You think we do?
Yes, we have the vehicles to stop it. If tomorrow morning Africans in the United States began to recognize that they owe Haiti a debt.
All right, yeah.
That has to be paid. Haiti sent in 15,000 troops to fight for our freedom during the Civil War.
Is that a fact, really?
That is a fact of history.
Yeah.
Those men gave their lives, many of them, fighting for the liberation of Africans in the United States.
Okay, good. Okay, yeah, and they were in the First Republic, weren't they, in the hemisphere?
Please, they were the first real republic in the hemisphere, the first real democracy in the hemisphere, because they ended slavery.
Right.
America may call itself a republic, may call itself a democracy, but America was a slave state.
Absolutely, apartheid.
Yes, so it kept, it continued
ugly.
Worse than before, actually.
The American dilemma, Gunnar Myrdal called it.
That's right.
That was our dilemma, the main dilemma. We've addressed it somewhat.
We have somewhat, but the African has to force America to continue to address it.
Okay.
It is through our eyes that we look in the mirror and see something other than ourselves.
Yeah, but do we need that on a global scale now?
We're going to have it on a global scale now because Africans
Where is the vision that can inspire people?
How people worldwide, Africans, are talking about the destructions of Africans from Australia, all across Asia, all across Africa, all across Europe, all across the Americas.
Okay, because
it is the destruction of black people.
Well, we just did this thing in Libya, and that's attacking Africa, isn't it?
Oh, my goodness, yes. We're talking Africa, but we're also attacking the black Africans in Libya and Africa.
Yeah, there are some black Africans. They're being called mercenaries by some, and they're being attacked. The rebels are attacking anything black, you know, because
they're carrying on with the old traditions of those old
slave masters.
Arab-minded, no different than any other Western European mind. They're carrying on with that same tradition that was being wiped out with the emergence of the new Arab states.
Okay, and a lot of those people are there because I know some people from Africa, and he for instance, Libya. We're talking about Libya now, apart from Mubarak or Saudi Arabia or something like that, which is a whole different kettle of fish in terms of that area. He was an anti-imperialist from the get-go.
Yes.
First thing he did was to force the United States of America out of the Wheelers, which was the major Air Force base, SAC base, huge, forced them to leave, and supported every one of the revolutionary struggles bringing liberation to the countries of Africa.
That's Gaddafi.
He supported all of them.
Yes,
all right?
That's Gaddafi, yes.
He knows a lot of people. Mandela loved the man. Mandela said no one helped break the back of apartheid in South Africa more than Muammar Gaddafi. Now,
that's gospel.
he was from the get-go an enemy of imperialism, so you're standing up in a certain sense, like Emmett Till or other people who are challenging the power du jour.
But he was also an enemy of racism, of the European racism, which fell on the historic racism, but he was an enemy of that racism. He was an enemy of this whole thing about we're Arabs, and Arabs are different than Africans. He was clear that we're Africans.
No, he's done a lot.
We're both Africans.
Yeah.
And so let us see ourselves as Africans and discontinue this, I'm better in the North than you are in the South.
Now, who else was there? You had some others he was not a communist, so he wasn't even a Marxist, okay?
No, certainly not,
We did have a man in 1959 make a revolution 90 miles off the United States named Castro.
Fidel
and
Castro.
Then we did much like what...
With Che Guevara and others, but
indeed. And everything. They made that, and you know, they had a thing there. It was very similar to what they did in Libya now. They were going to land, and then there was going to be, they were going to support, and they had forces. They were going to do like what they've done in Libya because they were behind a lot of what took place or support. It couldn't have happened without the CIA, DIA, forces encouraging that over a long period of time, in cahoots with the International Monetary Fund, setting up conditions when they wanted to come in out of the cold, in a sense, was safe. After 2003, Gaddafi had set up this thing, always being on the side of the people. All the Amerindian nations who've been very shabbily treated by European colonists in all parts of the Western Hemisphere are in support, tend to be in support of him. Progressives around the world were in support of him and his ideas. Even the people of Libya writ large, after they made the revolution in 1969, by the time it got in place, they had a lot of money, and he spread it around to everybody to where all of the human index indicators went from very, very low at the time of the revolution. They had a Holocaust that had wiped out 1/3 of their population in concentration camps under the Italian fascists. And they went to the top of the mark. higher than anyone else in Africa.
Higher than anyone. The highest human index in Africa is in Libya.
So he was very
13,000 plus a year.
So you're going to have a lot of people who are in support of him in his position. Now something's gone on, where you get these people coming out of Benghazi and so forth. And something's gone on to where there was this, particularly it came on after 2003.
You know, America
is a revolutionary.
Let's listen to the list of things that America's doing around the world. One, the continued assassinations, which we already knew.
We haven't got but 1 hour, darling.
We got counter-terrorist raids.
Doing wrong is going to take
we got long-range renaissance. We got intelligence analysis, foreign troop training, weapons of mass destruction and counter-proliferation operations. We're organizing teams of people and nations.
Yeah.
Libya is one of them.
Yeah.
So the Benghazi lie, of Gaddafi killing up all these people in Benghazi, and the U.S. had to run in here along with NATO to stop him from killing the Obama burden that he will bear until his eternity.
Yeah, I know. I don't know.
He'll bear it until his eternity because he's a lie, and the truth has never been in him. That this man would tell a lie that there was some mass destruction of humanity happening in Libya, and use that to invade a nation.
Well,
to bring back colonialism to Africa.
Well, it seems like what they call imperialism by the European powers and that sort of thing. They'd like to get a base there to be able to operate to invade Africa and to seize the resources of Africa back for the European overlords.
That's
much
right.
like it seems that way to me. It's just neo-colonialism, Eurocentric extension of power.
I agree with you, Harold. I don't think it seems. I think we can document it. Now, the African Union has utterly refused to recognize this, in quotes, rebel government. This American government that they're setting up in Libya
Well, there
today.
may be some hope in that. That may be a branch of humanity, or a group of humanity, had time to come out from under the yoke of colonialism and so forth, formulated things. Nothing's perfect and everything like that, but there may be people stirring among the masses. The interests of the world serve only about 5 or 7% of the world at the very top. That's where all the wealth goes. That's where all the interests are. That's where all the power is. It's all there, and the masses of the people are just counted as like
less than 3% in the United States. Less than 3% in the United States. That's awful.
Yeah, it's the same in the United States.
What is awful is that the masses allow this to happen.
Well, they didn't have much say under the Romans and everything. They were serfs or the king or everything. It's always there's been a lord.
It's always from the bottom that seems to be the uprisings.
Well, yeah.
In the case of Rome, it came from outside and inside. I hope it doesn't come from the outside.
Most of those things didn't succeed. I mean, in terms of uprising, Spartacus tried.
But they were the spark. They were the spark.
They were sparks, yeah.
That will lead to another mass fire in the future.
Well, do you think they're going to be able to fire up, if that's the right term?
Oh, I think it's firing up Africa right now. When we look at 22 African nations have signed on to this, to recognize this new government in Libya. But Africa has 54 nation states.
Yes, that's true.
Except for Somalia, which is not an active government. But the rest of them have not. And they refuse to. They stand with the African Union. I think it may be an indication that Gaddafi's move toward a United States of Africa is beginning to take hold in Africa.
Well, I would hope it would. It's certainly needed. They could supplant in many ways the the International Monetary Fund treatment of those countries and bring some justice, social development funds, communication things that are going to benefit the. So he's got a lot of support among some of the least advantaged people of the world.
That's right. Least
now that might be what we need is an
least army. Advantage, but the wealth is and resources.
But the wealth and resources.
The continent's resources are among the wealthiest on planet. So least advantaged people, but the wealth is and the resources.
Okay, and maybe in the vision of a need for not only that would make the civil rights movement in the United States of America small scale compared to bringing elemental justice to the whole world economic order, which is not in the cards by the adherence to outdated institutions and notions of organization that is being led by the model primarily by the United States of America that doesn't have vision that serves anything other than the very wealthy, and everything goes to the wealthy, and that's the way it's tending.
And that is what they're doing now. News. I was shocked when I found out there was a bill coming to the Congress that would be asking the Congress to approve a half a day work hours, 4 hours a day, really, essentially. You go work for 4 hours for the American population, for the workforce. Work 4 hours, then somebody else picks up the next 4 hours. Sounds like being back in the cotton field doing some kind of piecemeal work. But that is going to our Congress. You work 4 hours, I work 4 hours. Now, my daddy talked about 1944 in Mississippi, in Jackson. They had little factories right outside of the city, or really, I guess, right out the city limits. But anyway, that's what's very rare for black folk to get any real work, other than, you know, working somebody's yards or doing caddy work.
People went north, didn't they?
Well, yeah,
there was a migration.
Well, there'd been a migration,
Chicago,
but this is the blacks who stayed and who are now getting what Mississippi has, a little it did get of the war industries around Jackson.
Okay, yeah.
So Daddy shows up for work one morning. He was one of the lucky ones that got the job. So Daddy showed up the first day he worked and got his 50 cents, and he came home. I think they only paid him 50 cents.
50 cents
for his
for
day's
the day.
work.
Yeah.
The following day he showed up, and a man threw a pistol up beside his head, a black brother, and said, "I'm working this job today." Says, "I'll give you your half of the money when I'm through." So my daddy every day would show up to get his half of the money, the quarter, whatever it was, and he worked him another job, because that is what this sounds like. This is what it sounds like. This Congress is
that bill you're talking about.
Yeah, of encouraging people. I want to work a full 8-hour day, at least 7, because I need 7. I need to take care of my family.
With all due respect, if I may, when they're talking about that, by and large, although maybe there's a great, it gets confusing because you get into all kinds of human values, and it's good to get to those because they're going to have to get to those in order to get some sort of for want of a better term, a workable ideology or operating manual for Spaceship Earth or something that's relevant to what the future requires. When they're talking about people getting a job, and that's what they're talking about, mostly what they're talking about isn't the joy of the job. Most
Certainly
of the
not
jobs are not in the
low work satisfaction.
What you are is you're it's like a military model. You're told what to do by the senior vice president, and it's all corporate cubicle capitalism or anything. It's not that. It's just that that's the way for them to get money.
That's right. Not getting a job, you're getting a job to get money. Yeah.
Wait, Job, Job, like it's like ancient Job. I want to look at the etymology of that word. It should be Job. But there's nothing so great about somebody, it's a question of demand. How are you going to get demand into the hands of the people? Reverend Ike, the guy who's following the Church of Reverend Ike, my friend Nat picked up on the other day, and he'd say money.
The job living,
But the thing is that I think that's a major problem that ought to be addressed by progressive people. They're locked up in this idea about how wonderful it is to work. Now, I don't know that that's true.
It's built on the Christian ideology now.
Well, it's built on the Puritan ethic,
sure.
all the ethics, work hard, save, all these kind of things that are built, and you've gotten that kind of thing worked out. But the thing is that the progress of technology is that more and more of the world's work is being done not by labor, and they're not going to be needed.
That's correct.
Like they were in order to get a product or even a service. They're not going to be, and people get their identity by what they do. I'm a doctor who cures cancer. I'm a this, I'm a that, and everything, or whatever. That's one example. And there'll always be a melding between the two. But the main thing is that the actual, if you measure it, the productiveness of the new society isn't tied so much as it was to labor. And
not the human labor anyway.
Human labor.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, no, you got a combine. It goes through a field that doesn't even have a driver. It's just a computer driving the damn combine.
That's correct.
And there's still the left they're going to say, let's get a job. Now, what should happen, the masses of the people should own the friggin' combine, should own the capital instrument, and they're hung up.
That is why this Gaddafi is being destroyed.
Maybe. That would be too
subtle. Among the things, when this man talks about partners and not workers.
That's right.
That is owning the modes of production owning the very resource itself, owning the land.
Own that was producing the wealth and not have it all
no longer be a worker, you become a partner.
Yeah, no, true. Now, wait a minute. In Libya, they did. They were able to distribute good living standard, went from, you've seen the statistics, from 10 to 15% literacy, 96%.
That's right.
Clean water, education for all, health for all, everything. Everybody owns their home, their automobile. And they got through that because they distributed. It was a small country. They set up participatory democracy.
That's right.
Town hall meetings could work with 4 or 5 million people, like Vermont. It's not a great big country, and everything set up a model that was ahead of history's curve, where people can have some say politically in the affairs of their own situation. But then in the private sector, you didn't do away with it. You can have a private sector, but the private sector should be controlled. They just allowed the private sector to take over everything, and they set everything up on their own. And the private sector, you could, in Libya, you couldn't hire anybody. They all had to own the capital assets. They had to be partners.
Couldn't hire a Libyan.
The citizens should own the productive capital instruments. And why the progressive community doesn't pick up on that idea? Because they're singing how wonderful it is to work. Now, that's an important lesson we teach the children in school and everything. But what the important thing is...
Oh, Lord, let me labor.
Well, let me not labor.
The day is done.
Listen, did you ever have to pick cotton?
Yes, I picked cotton.
It's terrible, I'm told.
I mean, now you can see it forever. I mean, you don't ever lose it.
I'm glad. That's an onerous task.
If you got a machine, I love picking cotton.
Oh, you do? Okay, I'm sorry.
That's a bad example. Bad example. I just didn't own the damn field and I didn't get paid.
No, but there's a difference between, let's say, an artist at the easel who's doing a painting because that's called work.
Yes.
When you're doing something you want to do, not something that's outer directed, in order to do something. Do you understand?
Yeah.
That's gotten confused with that. Do what the man says. That's mostly what it is.
But the servitude we were talking about, because it means that you're a servant to what? America has the master what? The master slave law, which is a law of the workforce. That's a labor law. That's a labor law for this country. Master slave. I can't be master. When I heard the word master, I said, master servant? What the hell is this?
Master slave. You might as well say
well, this is slave. I mean, what it is. But it makes you, when you're white, it makes you feel different than the slave in the field.
Perhaps
but you're still the same thing.
Yeah, but it's also...
Same thing, same amount of pay. As the sister told Dr. King, the sister out of Kentucky, I worked in the fields with side by side, and she used the word... That's what we call the N-word today, and today I don't feel like jumping on it. With side by side with them Negroes.
Yeah.
And they got 50 cents and I got 50 cents. But I was better off because I was white. We both got 50 cents.
Yeah. Now, what I'm trying to say is the idea is that the productive process, you get an algorithm that can do what 500,000 people had to do in the past, and brings more service and good design and a lot of capability, and it doesn't need the people. Like Lily Tomlin, remember she sat like this and she was connecting this one to this one and this one to this. And that's what most of the work is. Now, it's always needed. We're going to have some of that, but it's not something to be celebrated, and it's something to be, in a certain design sense, made eliminated. And then you're going to, the problem is, like Mr. Keynes, who was the guy who set it all up after Roosevelt and the Second World War, the International Monetary Fund, everything, they set it up. He said that you're going to be confronted, I brought this up in another program, you're going to be confronted with massive technologically, and the grandchildren of 1930, he wrote in their maturity, they're going to be confronted, that's about now, they're going to be confronted with something that's hard to understand beyond the politics and everything, of massive technologically induced unemployment. Tremendous productive capability.
That's right.
Wait a minute. Tremendous productive capability doesn't require the labor. Now, the only way the people on the left think about labor, money getting to the masses of the people is through them being like a serf on the feudal estate. It's okay for the small 2% to own all the capital assets, just like kings.
No, that got job.
They own all the assets that are producing the wealth, realize, increasingly. That's the trend of the world. And it's more here than others, but it's the trend of the world. And they should have a critique where instead of saying, on private property, they're going to say private property. In the Soviet Union, they did away with it because an evil institution creates inequality. Labor theory of value, how wonderful it is. What they should be doing is say private property is fine it should be owned by everybody. Con Edison should be owned by all the people who use Con Edison as a capital asset that brings money to them because they have a private property ownership stake. That's a system of understanding that could hoist the capitalist system on its own petard, because we're on a losing course now. You've got the whole angst taken up in the human condition taken over by these people that are called Tea Party, or that kind of thing, and they're tapping into that angst, and we don't have something. We're protecting what we have, and it's good. Social Security should not be allowed to be raided. Medicare, all of these things that have been done with Roosevelt, and we can protect all that, but we don't have an active way of hoisting that system on its own petard, and I think it's needed on a world scale if this world's going to survive in this species. I think it's an economic issue that is not being addressed by the progressive or the intellectual community.
No, because the capitalists feel I can just go to new territory and in Haiti.
Sure.
Whereas you and I are sitting here because of the recent major storm that came through, the hurricane.
Did you see all the angst that was manifest?
Oh, man.
That's deep-seated angst. There's deep-seated angst in the soul of the people of this planet, and with good reason, because it's very dangerous. You got troops going everywhere, and the only answer they have is to drop bombs on
That's
people.
right.
And they don't have a vision of how they're going to organize the world society in a way that can bring justice and fulfillment of the human potentiality to everybody, which is now latently there, able to be done, but we need new institutional structures,
Haiti,
and we don't have a vision of that.
The mudslides are coming.
Mm-hmm. Haiti.
People in the camps, and there's 5 million Haitians that live in tents, under tents. 1 million that have nothing.
I know, it's horrible.
And to think that these people that were in these little camps, and one specific camp, Pignole St. Cyr, who led the International Commission of Inquiry's session, and we're going to talk about that session with the UN hopefully before we end here.
Yeah, we want to get a little card up about that. Don't
yeah, we do need it. Yeah, we need it to the Guadalupe tour and supporting that movement. But we got a word back from him that they were removing people from the camps along the rivers because when they set up the camps after the earthquake was in a rush, people found land wherever they could find some land stable enough. Yeah. Not affected so much by the earthquake to be able to settle. So this particular camp he refers to is one that has 500 people in it. They're actually going down to the United Nations with its guns, putting guns in people's bellies and saying, "Get out."
Oh my God! Really?
Where do they go?
Yeah, right.
Mudslides are wiping away just loads of camps all over the place. Yeah. So right now, as we talk, the pain in Haiti is reaching another level.
Let me say, I think there's a thing that relates to the people that are doing this, right? And Josh, if you can, maybe you could bring that in the control room. They could bring up the notice you have about this.
Yeah, please do.
If you can bring it up while we're talking.
Yeah, the Guadalupe Haiti tour.
Haiti tour. Yeah.
We were successful last week. After 2 years
of
pushing to get the UN to just recognize and receive letters from us. Okay. To get the United Nations to meet with us.
It'd be good if you can get some enlightenment there, yeah.
So we had with us for this meeting to present the findings of the International Commission of Inquiry on Haiti, which met in Haiti in September of 2009, 4 months before the earthquake. And when it met, it was after the 4 major storms that hit, the 4 major hurricanes. And these were all major hurricanes that had wiped out the whole landscape. If you looked at the mountains, you could just see the trees wiped down.
Yeah, horrible.
And so you can imagine now these mudslides, because there hasn't been much to build on since then. So you can imagine you'd have to reforestate. Right. So this situation that we met with, we was faced with a hearing from the Haitian people who came before us about the United Nations, because we had received dozens of complaints as individuals. So we formed a commission that represented Brazil, Algeria, France, United States of America, Guadeloupe, Martinique.
Okay, good.
And we can, and under the leadership of the brother who out of Uruguay, who had gotten the Nobel Prize. His name I can't pull back now, but he's a great man. Okay. And so we came here under this convener, who could not join us at the last minute, but he certainly was our convener. And we heard from these people, and these people came in and they were raising questions. telling us stories that I just could not believe could happen to any humanity. Of the United Nations, I would say, well, good God, if this is true, it means the United Nations to nothing.
United Nations being corrupted?
United Nations came into Haiti in 2004 for the 8th time in 20 years.
The United Nations gave their thing to go into Libya, too. I mean,
whenever this is America.
It's all run by the power elite.
That's right. And right now they're talking about Libya's $30 billion and what's going to happen to it. The UN is saying, let's give it to the rebels. The UN needs to, we need to close the UN temporarily.
And they wouldn't let Ali, did you see the UN wouldn't let Ali Traki into New York to present his credential? They wouldn't give him a visa.
I'm sure they wouldn't.
Staggering.
I'm sure they wouldn't. But here we are in Haiti, and people are telling us about rapes, murders, disappearances, about children being jailed and college students being beat up. We got all of these things going on, and so we take this information. Of course, we weigh and measure it, and we go to the United Nations Command in Haiti. They, of course, don't really, they admit they had some problems, but would not say exactly what those problems were. But do say that the lead general made it clear that, one, they were the government. For all practical purposes, the government of Haiti. Now, Brazil heads that force that's in Haiti. And the brother-in-law of the then president of Brazil was the one that also was putting up the assembly plant. So you can see the monetary value for the Brazilian government elite. But after we take this, the hearing ends, and we assemble our facts, and we want to present it to the UN. And so we got a chance. We thought to present it to the Haiti desk. That is what we were finally told. We would be meeting with Hugo Salinas of the Haiti desk. He was the leader of the Haiti desk. When we got there, we found out Mr. Salinas was also the deputy in command of the UN peacekeeping forces.
Okay, where did that leave you, or what did
so
it say?
we got a chance to ask him questions, to place upon him the questions from mothers who say, look, my children have been taken away by these people who are child trafficking. I have been raped. I have a baby as a result of that rape. I've asked the UN to try to get the father to at least help me take care of the baby. The UN has told us that the soldiers have immunity from prosecution. So we went through all of that, and of course the UN responded by saying, look, we understand. We agree with you. And the brother had a stack of paper, and he was a black brother. He had a stack of papers of about like that sitting, he said, on my immediate right. And he said, we have these complaints, and I wanted to snatch his papers, which had been a bit unfair. And I thought, it was not, I've done this before, I will take your papers. I thought, we're not a proper place and an appropriate time for me to take the man's papers so that I could share the documentation he had. So he agreed. And he tells us that 167 Sri Lanka troops had been removed for the rape and violation of women. And sent home, of course, with immunity from prosecution, because they can only be prosecuted by their own home government. You
can only be prosecuted if you're a loser. Well, if you win a war, you're above the law.
Well, for the United Nations, no peacekeeper can be prosecuted.
Well, if you're a winner.
Winner or loser.
Winners never go in the dock.
If the UN is here as a peacekeeping force, and in this case it has police, not military, police. Because we need to look at that racist structure which was set up in 45. It was set up so that there's not one single black nation among the military forces. Not a single black nation.
Okay,
There's not a single, only a couple yellow.
There's no single African nation that's going to accept NATO presence in the heart of Africa for them to assert military authority over there either. They won't go anywhere. They might try to do it now.
Well, these nations are blocked out. The structure is such that
now they can go back to Wheelus Air Force Base and set up control to get control for the private sector, for the profit of the oil companies and everything for them and for the United States. The thing of Haiti is terrible.
So we're looking at Haiti, and Haiti has these police, and Cambodia, $1 a day if you got a job. Sri Lanka, $1 a day if you got a job. The nations, it's an employment force. An employment force for the poor sectors of the world. So you can send your troops here, and they get $500 or $600 a month. And that helps them to take care of their families. Meanwhile, they violate whoever they find. They kill, they murder, they disappear. In the case of one psychologist, they didn't just disappear the psychologist. people were asking, where is his car? They took the people's goats on arrival. I mean, things that seem simple to us, but if one of your basic staples is goat.
Yeah, right.
And the UN takes your goat.
Yeah, right.
And if you complain, they beat you and send you to jail.
Well, that's the story. The history of the world is like that, more or less. The strong have always ruled over the weak, and the weak have had to do what they must. They've had no, and it won't be able to stand the test of time immediately ahead. And we don't have a vision of how we're going to organize things according to some reason. Like we started off talking, what happened in the 60s? There was something that was blowing in the wind.
It's blowing in the wind. The United Nations must leave Haiti immediately.
Okay, that's one issue.
Now they're saying they're going to, first he said retreat, and then he said exit strategy. I like that retreat because he told the truth.
Okay.
Because the world has pressure on them to get the hell up out of Haiti.
Well, that's one issue. But there's other issues. You got them in all the stands. You got them all over the world.
Now I want to deal with Haiti now because Haiti, we can see they don't have a vision.
You got another card
and
you wanted them to bring up?
Please, folk, we need money. The Guadalupe Haiti tour, which brought in the International Commission, was able to force the United States, under the leadership of Brazil, we got a lot of Brazilian help with this, to United Nations to meet with us. We need to be able, one, to pay the bill for this group that we brought in. And so we need people to please send contributions.
I think we sent a card.
Please set this contribution card up. We need contributions immediately through IFCO. Yeah, that is a 501c3, the Interreligious Foundation of Community Organizations, 418 West 145th Street. Please send contributions immediately there.
Okay, they can
doesn't matter how small, we need the contributions.
If they can put something up. Maybe you can get Kickstart.
We have them out. We have I left a card out there. I'm sure they'll put it up.
Yeah.
But the Guadalupe Haiti tour is saying that we also need to be in Haiti. We need representatives there, so we need to be able to fund as many people who are willing to leave New York, to leave the East Coast, to go with us on the 17th and 18th of November into Haiti, where people are coming from around the world, so that America will have a presence of substance at an international conference.
Okay.
They say we want the UN out. We don't want excuses from the UN. And we want the UN to face with reparations. We don't want to hear that immunity stuff because there's a case out of the Netherlands that involves Kosovo and that mass murder of the Serbs.
Yeah, okay.
The Serbs mass murder.
Yeah, it'd be good to bring that up again.
Of those Muslims. And that case has been successful, and so therefore Haiti can sue.
Okay, and
she can sue. She can get him. There's no longer any immunity. We don't want to hear it.
And one condition like that can be a model for other things in other parts of
all over the world,
so it can join forces with others.
Selena sit there and looked at us and said, "Well, you know, we got Haiti, Congo, and Kosovo."
Yeah.
And I thought, well, you're being cute. You may think you're being cute. Yes, we have Haiti, and you're going to be out of Haiti, out of Congo, out of Africa, out of Asia.
We're out of time. I'm sorry. Thank you. Colia Clark is our guest, and she goes on. We could go on for hours. Thanks, Colia. Keep up the good work. Thanks for viewing. We're coming back again tomorrow. Thanks a lot for that and everything. We only scratched the surface of a very big subject. Thanks for so much. It's so good to see you. I'm glad you're in such good fettle.
All right.
Okay, please tune in. We'll be coming back again tomorrow.
And tell them, Harold, if the devil's in the church and they won't do right.
All right.
We're going to throw him out, but right straight on out. We're
now sing us out.
Sing us
out. Sing us out.
Let the church roll on.
Yeah, let the church roll on.
Hey, let the church roll on. Just throw him out, but right straight on out.
Yeah, okay.
And let the church roll on.
Okay.
The president's in the White House. And he won't do right. We're going to throw him out, but right straight on out. And let the nation go on.
Is that
let
a song?
Let the nation go on. It's an old religious tune. Let the nation go on.
Were you singing that back in 60s?
Were they singing that in the 40s when I was born?
All right.
In the 50s and in 60s. Hey, let the nation go on.
Let the nation go on. Let the word go forth.
We're going to throw him out right straight on out.
Okay.